Alex Honnold did this like series of buildings in San Francisco, if I recall, like of soloing pretty iconic buildings in San Francisco. He was talking about in this video that sometimes buildings are sketchier than soloing outdoors because you're not quite sure how solid the construction is.
I mean, they are two very different mediums, and yeah, buildings are mostly, you know, metal and concrete and some fiberglass, plastic, and things like that. And as such, you kind of have to have the same appreciation and understanding of your materials, a bit like sandstone versus granite versus limestone, and you know, you get quite good at assessing minor differences in something and going, well, that's actually bomber, but it doesn't look that good. But this one here looks good, but actually it's really sketchy. So I think there is a lot of difference, yeah, in the materials, and you basically pick that up over time of climbing on them and playing around with stuff and just seeing how much stuff flexes, and people pass knowledge on to what's good, what's not. And so then you weigh up your understanding of how much you know the medium that you're climbing on a particular building with the degree of risk that you take, and then it's just a sort of a usual weighing up of the risk reward profile on everything and how much backup you have on something. Is it like a really secure style of climbing? Have you got 4 points on all times? Is it layback versus jamming? Are your feet actually taking a majority of your weight? So if one hand, you know, pulled on you, would you actually be fine? You know, there's all those bits that add into it. But the interesting thing with it, in terms of that assessment of the material, is that there's parts of building climbing I always think are surprisingly risky versus bits in climbing that you always think are like, that's the okay bit. So for example, I think you have to be really careful on buildings on the last layer of the top out material, even if that's like a section of brickwork right at the top of the building, because this is the bit that's been weathered the greatest and often has the least degree of certainty in it. And you can sometimes just pick up the actual sort of like the bricks themselves and that top kind of coping of the building and just pull them out. And that's the bit where you're like, I'm topped out. I've grabbed the jug to finish. Glory. But that could potentially be, more dangerous than you think.
Is urban free soloing for the most part on-sighting as well?
Yeah, or maybe you could call it yo-yo on-sighting. So I've definitely done it before. I've climbed up something part of the way and gone, not so sure. Maybe I'll go back down, have a little think, come back up again. And the second time you go, actually, it's not as hard as I thought it was. It's just that I was a bit more nervous, or I wasn't familiar with how that would feel. And then it gets a little easier. So but I would say for the most part, it is highly unpracticed. Aside from, like, I do know some people that will practice stuff. Like, I remember I had an opportunity years and years ago when I worked down in London to meet up with a local guy down there that climbed a lot of buildings, and we were dropping a rope down the side of a really big building to basically practice it beforehand and work out how doable it was. But we were going out at 4 a.m. in the morning when no one will be around to be able to do that. And that was, essentially to sort of protect against the unknown of committing to something that was quite big.
Yeah, tell me about, if you could, like, let's maybe dive into this Berlin trip a little bit and what goes into planning for something like that. And my assumption here is that this is not legal, at least some of the videos that I've seen, end with the climber kind of walking away with some police escorts on the side. So I imagine that's part of the trip planning as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's in almost all cases, you could argue that there is zero permission to be able to do this sort of stuff.
All right, y'all, just a quick minute here to shout out today's sponsor, which is Scarpa. Oh, I'm so psyched. My very first pair of climbing shoes and approach shoes were by Scarpa, and I have loved them ever since. I'm so grateful that they're supporting the show here. Y'all, whether you are smearing granite like Amity Warm, towing into steep pockets like Maddie Hong, bouncing from volume to volume like Nathaniel Coleman, or tossing crazy heel hooks like Alex Puccio, Scarpa has got you. They have been making the best footwear for peak performance as well as sustainability since 1938. They are here to take care of your adventures. You can shop the entire collection at scarpa.com. Scarpa, no place too far. let's get back to the video.
And so you have to be, I guess, reasonably aware that you're either going to run into some bureaucratic administrative time issues with the police if you get involved with them. And then also for the people that are involved in the building as well, I think it is good practice to try and have as little impact on them, whether it's either invading someone's privacy, which I think you have to be really, really careful of, or at least that for me is quite important. And then also just from people being involved in offices and being distracting, messing around with people's days and doing things like that.
Right.
So to me, it feels important to try and do it in times when there's very, very few people people around, so that you can just get on with the climbing, not disturb anyone, barely anyone will notice you. And that's generally been my sort of MO for doing that kind of climbing. I'm not interested in doing it for kind of public spectacle in the middle of the day and just messing up a load of people's days. I mean, I've been through that once with the whole Great Rift M5 under the bridge thing that was in Real Rock, and the police were very upset about that at the time and had told us they closed off the road. And then I was just thinking, I can't be that person that just closed off a road, messed up 1,000+ people's day because now they're late for work or they had something to do. And I just didn't feel good about that at all. So I try and be really careful to stay away from that. So the time aspect is one element of it. And then also it's just choosing objectives that you think are more based on sort of commercial property or abandoned properties, where, again, it's going to have less impact, less people are going to notice you. And that comes down to the whole scoping out thing. So like in Berlin, I spend nearly all of my time cycling around on a bike. And I like exploring the city and kind of going off route where I need to go to then just check out different buildings. Every traffic light, I'll just be kind of scanning left and right and looking to see whether I can see anything that's appealing. And after a while, a bit like when we were doing the exploration of bridges, you get an eye for designs of building that work really well for climbing. And you suddenly realize you've got the same eye for rock types and crag types where you go, that will produce really good limestone caves. So I'm going to explore further up that valley because I think this is right. You're now like, that's just the right type of concrete. They've got the breaks in the right places. That could have something on the backside of the building. You go and have a look.
Is there thought to, like when you're looking at these, like landings and how the walk off would be? Like, you climb up to the top of a building, you're at the top now. What do you do?
Yeah. So landings, I'd say, for me, I just don't really consider it because I'm very much I am absolutely not falling. One that I did recently, right below the route, was just a big metal fence, like spiky thing directly under. So even if you'd fallen at like, I don't know, 20 feet or so, it would have been really, really horrible. So but it didn't weigh up in my mind of, that's a problem for the route. It was, that's something that I can stand on to do the first move off the ground.
To establish.
Yeah, like nothing else more than that. So that's kind of useful. But certainly the walk off or how you get back down is an element of it. And I tend to take the approach of, you should be able to climb to the point where you can reverse everything anyway, which is really what you should be doing for the most of the time if you want to solo a reasonable amount. And I've soloed lots and lots of routes over my career of climbing, and nearly all of them, apart from things that are practiced on a top rope beforehand, are things that I can reverse every single move pretty comfortably. And that's an important part of it, I think.
I'd love to hear about some of your favorite experiences since you've been doing this for so long. What comes to mind as some of your favorite urban climbing adventures?
I have to say probably the favorite ones are the ones where I've got the most trouble, but I can't really legitimately share those really. I shouldn't. Yeah.
Are those? Have you been the record been sealed? Have you been court ordered to not speak of certain adventures?
No, it hasn't quite got that bad, but certainly have Let's put it this way, had to do some serious running in a few instances.